You guys are going to be our buyers, right? So you're going to think, you guys are going to think like buyers. You are wholesalers, right? Yep. Buyers and buyers. We are real estate agents. So the thought is, you guys are thinking just like sellers. What's in it for me? What's my net? What am I getting? You guys are the agents that are trying to protect your seller or not, depends on who you are. And for you guys are the buyers thinking in the frame of saying, okay, what's in it for me? I don't care about the seller. I want this, right? Okay, so everybody got their role. All right, so then we're going to go through, as we go through the class, this is what you can expect. So we're going to define what wholesaling is. I'm going to tell you what our brokerage legal position is with E&O insurance and fun stuff like that. We're going to talk about licensing, so why I guess you should be very careful when you're doing wholesaling, if you're going to be doing it. Working with wholesalers, advertising, and then we'll do like a brief summary of kind of what we've talked about. So, all right. So anybody want to take a stab at what wholesaling is? Anybody have a definition or an idea? Sure, go ahead.
You go find somebody in their house, get in contact with them, and then put that contract to someone else that wants to buy the home.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be a for sale by owner. So you'll know that, in fact, we just had an agent call me yesterday that he got a wholesaler on his own listing that offered $85,000 on a $125,000 property where he was going to end up being a dual agent. Not a great thing. But definition by what Ohio is saying, a wholesaler, wholesaling is a practice where a wholesaler approaches a homeowner to purchase their property and then solicits a second buyer to purchase their contract interest to purchase that home. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, it can be an investor, it can be an agent, it can be any human that is looking to solicit another offer on a property that they are making an offer on. Okay.
Are we seeing this a whole lot more right now, or?
We are seeing it not as much right now in our, I guess I'll restate that. We aren't seeing it as real estate so much, but there are private groups of wholesalers that go and solicit homeowners. In fact, I can tell you it happened to us this past year. We actually had an agent. They represented a seller, on the seller. Unbeknownst to them, a wholesaler came in. The seller signed a purchase agreement to purchase the home. And subsequently, we found out about it. We called the wholesaler, and the wholesaler said, well, tell them why they want this contract. And we said, well, we have an exclusive right to sell. You can't do that. And unfortunately, he put, I don't say a lien against the title, is what it's called. And we were not able to because the contract wasn't accepted. Our legal counsel basically said, yeah, it's not an offer that we have an exclusive right to sell it. And whatever they did is with them, but the seller has the exclusive right to sell it. Unfortunately, there was no title company around here that would touch it because of the cloud on the title. So pretty scary, actually. As we get started, oh, go ahead.
How did the wholesaler close out?
He didn't.
Also,
both lost out, but that's the problem is the seller is now stuck holding a property that they can't do anything with because they really didn't want to move forward with the wholesaler. I don't know if eventually they moved forward with a wholesaler because until that gentleman took the cloud off the title, no title company was going to close that. He would be the only one that could remove it. So he had the seller over a barrel and there was nothing we could do about it. It was predatory. Unfortunately, our seller was older individuals. The husband, I believe, was in a nursing facility and she was there working on things herself. And one of our agents was just knew this person was helping them as a good agent should. And unfortunately, as it turned out, this wholesaler just happened to go there and circumvent us and the entire process. And we moved forward with a different offer because, of course, we had the exclusive right to sell. There wouldn't be any reason that we shouldn't. And unfortunately, once we got to closing, there was a cloud on the title and we tried 3 different title companies and nobody would close it.
David, my dad's in the facility, he's in assisted living, but there are people like that at home. He's had people call him. And he's of sound mind enough to say, do with it, but he has a home in that township. A
lot of people aren't.
Agents too there. Which I don't even.
We're gonna cover that.
Definitely.
Sure.
Rich, so when you say it's a common title, like what does the wholesaler do?
From my understanding, they filed an affidavit of some type that said that they had a vested interest in the property and that it wasn't to be sold without their permission. And I don't know all the legal logistics of how that they did that, but I can tell you it happened like that. It was amazing. It couldn't be a mechanics lien, but it would be something similar. Yes. I'm sure just some kind of ownership interest or interest in the property saying that, you know, I have a vested interest in this property. You can't sell it without. It's just like a married couple, right? I mean, with dower, one spouse could stop the other spouse from selling the property. So as we get started here, I will say, I want to see if we can name all of our fiduciaries as professional real estate agents. So realtors, what is your fiduciary? And I can help you by saying old car.
Confidentiality.
Okay.
Reasonable care.
Okay. Reasonable care and skill.
What was the first one?
Obedience.
Okay. Loyalty, good. So we need the D and the A. Yeah, our agent row is killing it here. Great.
Disclosure.
Okay, good. Disclosure. So now we have A. Accountability. So there you go. So think old car, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, reasonable care, and skill. Now, even though I have segregated you to be sellers, buyers, and realtors, we are all realtors in this room or have a background in real estate, which means all of these are owed to our clients, right? So I ask you to keep that in mind when you're out there in the real world, because I'm going to give you some scenarios where the realtor here in this line, they're going to have to make sure that they're watching out for you or you, depending upon who they're working for. But when you're a seller or a buyer, you may not realize that your realtor actually owes you all of these duties. Okay. All right. So is wholesaling legal? Let's answer that question first. How many think it's legal? No, it does not depend on the state. How many people think it's illegal? Okay, good. Because it is completely legal. They are not selling real estate. What they are selling is their interest in the contract. They're selling their ownership interest in a contract. That does not require a real estate license as it does for us, because we don't actually own the property, right? We're helping them buy or sell the property. A wholesaler is not. They don't have to have a license. And to your point about outlawing, or whether it has to be outlawed, that I'm aware of, we just had a wholesaling class in February at the division. Well, I'm sorry, the division was there in front of Ohio Workers in February. There's a video, you can go back and watch. It's pretty interesting. We are not aware of any state that's outlawed wholesaling. They have made parameters around whether or not you need a license or what you can and can't do, but nobody has outlawed it. So is a license required to be a wholesaler? And the answer is, it depends. So you as a real estate agent, you have a real estate license. So you can't take that hat off and say, I'm no longer a real estate agent. I don't owe all of those fiduciary duties to my consumer. I just can be a regular person and I'm going to go buy this interest in this property and try and sell it. So it depends on what the wholesaler is doing. Sometimes they're engaging in the practice of real estate without being allowed to do that, without a license. So if the wholesaler, let me say this, as a real estate agent in this middle row, if you're representing a seller and you accept a wholesaler, the seller accepts a wholesaler's contract on the property, and the wholesaler says to you as an agent, I want you to resell this. Are you allowed to do that? And if you were allowed to do that, are you allowed to use photos or descriptions or addresses of the property? Go ahead.
You can only sell the property, you can't sell that contract. So
Because
If I'm
you have.
selling a property, then I would use pictures of all that, but
Mhm.
yeah, like if I'm an actual wholesaler trying to sell that property, I'm not. You're supposed, you have a contract that you can sell, not properties, pictures and all those.
Okay. So, like wholesale buyers, you guys are my wholesalers today. Do you care about anything other than getting that? So, are you allowed to market the property for sale
Yes,
as a wholesaler? Now,
even with the annual interest in it.
you don't have any ownership.
A lot of times they do, but don't they?
The problem, yes, they are engaging in the practice of law or real estate, I'm sorry, because they don't have a license. It is illegal for you or the realtor to use pictures, addresses, descriptions, anything like that and advertise that property for sale. You are not the owner of the property. The public is assuming that if you have it for sale as a wholesaler, you're the owner of the property, which is a misrepresentation. You are not the owner of the property. And the realtor, they would assume that if a realtor has it listed, they represent who? The seller, not you. So it is illegal. So it really depends on what the wholesaler is doing. That's why we find a lot of these Facebook groups and different private chat rooms that are not public to anybody else. They're wholesaler groups where all the wholesalers, and I point to you guys and say you all, because you're my wholesalers, you all are in that group saying, I've got this for sale, or I'm doing an email blast out to the realtors or to whomever else. I've got this house for sale, and in tiny, tiny letters in the bottom of the screen, you say it's a contract assignment, right? So all of those, just so you're aware, they have been forwarded to the division as they keep coming out. The division is inundated with these wholesalers right now, but all of the activities of the wholesalers are doing, most of them are doing it illegally. Mark?
Marketing.
Yes, we're going to go over some advertising. We're going to go over what you need to do as a realtor in order to be representing the seller, how you can represent a wholesale buyer. So yeah, we'll go over most of that. The other thing that you can't do as a real estate professional is, or the wholesaler, Mr. Wholesaler, you can't call a real estate agent. Well, you can, they shouldn't do it. You can't call a real estate agent and ask them to put something in multiple listing service that you don't own. So if you have a vested interest in the contract and you're under contract with a seller, unfortunately, you cannot then solicit a realtor to list that property for sale in the MLS because it's illegal. They need the owner's signatures, not yours, right? So that's, sorry.
Now, I was just saying like word of mouth. Does that constitute marketing?
It's still marketing. You're advertising a property for sale. And again, we're talking about realtors or wholesalers. There's a little bit different between a real estate professional and a wholesaler. They're not governed by any license or licensing, right? So where are you going to turn them into doing something like this supposed to do? Maybe the attorney general's office, regulatory, something like that. If you're running a realtor, where are you going to turn you at? The division of real estate in the road, and possibly the road. And that's why we're having this class today, the ability to present for realtors, but I'm giving you real world examples of what I can say.
So you're saying that in the wholesaler, is with the permission of the seller, can put it in.
No. The wholesaler is not allowed to do anything with the property. They have a contract interest in the property. That we have a piece of paper that they're selling. That's what they're selling. When you as a licensee represent a seller, you can put something in the MLS. We do it all the time. But the wholesaler has no ownership in that property. So in the example that I'm saying right now, let's say you have a house, you're the seller. Linda is listed your property for sale. Wholesaler comes over, makes an offer, you accept the offer as a seller. You think your house is on its way to closing. This gentleman calls Linda or calls, let's just say calls Grace. Let me put this property in the MLS and I'm gonna offer X for sale, I want this price. You get online all of a sudden and say, what are you doing? This is another topic. I'm gonna get this going in another real estate. Again, I don't know if you're into, but a realtor is gonna be the one that's in trouble because you list the property that you legally don't have the right to sell.
So there's no like torch that we need to sue them, sue the wholesaler.
But as a person, please sue them.
It's too much.
But again, we have a company in real estate, we haven't seen that.
So. That's where you should get out.
And hopefully, I will tell you, if you go back and watch, there's a gentleman came forward during the chat or during the class that we had in Columbus, and he said he read what a security is, like, and that you would need a Securities and Exchange Commission, like who could watch. And there's an vested interest that contract is a security because it's really a piece of paper that you have a note interest on. And so he's saying maybe we should be working with the Attorney General's office and the Securities and Exchange Commission because the wholesalers possibly have that note of security. That's what they're selling, and you have to be licensed to do that. So they are looking into it, but again, the division has how many real estate agents? 43,000 something in the entire state of Ohio. It takes about 2 years to do one investigation on one agent, let alone getting into all this, right? So, but it was interesting. It was, an interesting thought that they had not went down. We're all have our hats on for real estate agents, and that's where we're going with it. And perhaps it could be predatory at the very minimum. So, yep. All right. So let's talk about realtors representing a homeowner who is approached by a wholesale buyer. Okay. So first of all, Ohio Realtors attorneys are saying that they always recommend that you have an attorney review a wholesale contract. Whether you are representing the seller and you get a contract from a wholesaler from another agent, or whether you are the wholesaler and you are working with the buyer. And once you are on the seller side, if you're on the listing side and you receive that through the wholesaler, through another agent to the seller, that listing agent and the seller should be having an attorney review that contract to know what they're getting into. Because you don't have a law degree, right? You don't understand necessarily maybe what's all contained in this purchase agreement that may or may not be written on something that we've seen before. It could be written by an attorney on behalf of a wholesaler. So that's the first thing. The other thing is I would recommend they recommend that you bring all wholesaling contracts to your broker to review before going forward with them. I would tell you I'm comfortable looking at them, but I'm probably going to tell you have this seller go to an attorney because we don't want to be stuck holding the bag when somebody gets sued. Did you have a question?
Do the wholesalers typically bring a contract to you, or are they just gonna fill out the offer as a normal agent and kind of slide that wholesale?
Well, so we've seen it two ways. Like I said, understand that the agent that we had that had a seller represented, we represented a seller. That wholesaler went directly to the seller on their own purchase agreement, wrote it and had it signed by the seller.
Do we always recognize a wholesaler's contract? Do they?
Probably not, unless it has in there that it can be assigned, and then you're going to know right away. So
So they don't have anything, but they're not identifying themselves necessarily.
as a wholesaler, no.
You know that it's not another agent.
Gotcha.
But it could be, most likely, it could be another agent that's written the offer.
Right.
But if they have in there a signable contract, you're pretty much going to know that that person's a wholesaler, right? So the questions that you have to ask, if you're a seller, what do you care about? You care about the money and closing, right? So that's the thing. Is the wholesaler going to close? And that's the first question you as a real estate professional representing the seller has to ask. Are you going to close on this property? Because 9 times out of 10, a wholesaler never actually owns the property, right? They have an ownership interest in the purchase agreement of that property. They do not care about ever closing on the property. So if I represent a seller, the first fiduciary duty on this is one disclosure. I'm going to say I need to disclose this is a wholesaler. And secondly, I also need to say, do you plan on closing on this property? So I ask you as my wholesaler, do you plan on closing on a property? Right. As the agent for the buyer, don't you want to be paid on that? So you're hoping for a closing, right? Right. And you as a seller, you want this to close because you want your money and you want to move. So you have to identify, is that person actually going to close? And the answer is probably no. The other thing is transparency. So again, that's where the realtor representing the seller in this particular case has to say to them, I don't know if this is going to close. By the way, you're selling your house at 100,000 when it's really worth 125. You realize that by accepting this offer, that you are taking your home off the market, which goes into D, the MLS status. Once I accept this contract, I have to put in the multiple listing service that your property is under contract. We can either allow showings or not allow showings. How many agents in this room set up showings on a property that's under contract, allow showings. One hand goes up. And that's kind of iffy just because we can all do it, but you don't typically do it unless you have a buyer that's like, I want to see this house right now. I don't care it has a contract, I'll put a backup offer on it, right? So you as the listing agent, you better disclose to your seller that, hey, I don't know that we're going to resell your property considering the fact that, yeah, you could accept this offer, but the wholesaler now has the control, right? They're going to resell this property in some form or fashion. So you need to make sure that you understand as a seller and make sure that your seller understands that they could get more money for the property. Again, the one that we had yesterday, the property is listed at 124.9, a wholesaler came in at $85,000. Now, it's not going to go together, but if somebody were desperate, it absolutely could.
Because sometimes I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
But what about like a senior nursing home option?
Mhm.
If they feel like, well, I'm selling my home, everything's gonna be gone anyway. I'm gonna go on, you know, they don't care.
Sure.
We'll sell for whatever then. Wholesaler will come in.
Again, it goes back to predatory. I mean, that's what it's going back to. And then let's go ahead.
Like in that, for instance, it's almost good maybe as a listing, agent, sort of prepare your sellers, that if anyone were to come to you with a contract outside of us, just be aware that this is something that has happened, and like, you want the offers, you're signed up with us for a reason, like, you don't wanna go accepting offers that are with us, again, just like that. Yeah, like.
And that's part of the exclusive right to sell. An exclusive right to sell is not an open agreement. It's exclusive to Keller Williams Legacy Group Realty that we are the only we're the only company that can sell that home, right?
Would we be allowed to use the word predatory? So much. I mean, I would love to-
So that question was asked and it was quite funny. There's a he is amazing. He's actually a district vice president with Ohio Realtors as well. Very tall human being. And so he goes up to the podium and has to go up like 3 foot with the thing. And the next person has to come down and like lower it. But he comes up and he says, you know, he's from the Cleveland area. And he said, we've seen that this is happening. And he said, I want to know, am I protected or am I allowed to say what I really think about wholesalers in an appointment? And unfortunately, we had 2 attorneys at the table. We had our government affairs director for Ohio Realtors, and the other person was Daphne Hawk, who's the superintendent of real estate. Not one of them would answer that question because to be fair, even though a wholesaler is not a protected class, it could be, I mean, I'll give you an example. We are not even allowed, if there is a person that has been harassing one of our agents, I, as the broker, cannot send you all a message to let you know, stay away from this person, or somebody that's been like, they've got, and this has happened, they've gone through 3 of our realtors, they've given proof of funds that are false to every one of them. I still, our attorney says, do not send that out as a mass and do not send it to the board for them to send out. You could be sued because you are speaking ill of another human being, and it could be, if it's in print, it's libel or slander.
So can you say only it's being predatory like, and then it's away.
I would definitely explain it to my sellers. I think that it's important that you can just say, there are people that are looking for, they're predatory, right? And I mean, that word can mean a lot of different things. And I would definitely disclose to my sellers that you shouldn't be signing anything without me being present.
Who are here that they're Medicare, that they have to do a minimum amount even to was on our site at least. They can't go lower than that because they can be.
So you've got your realtor hat on. If I asked you as a wholesaler, do you care? You don't care. And I agree. That's, yep. Yeah, I agree. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
With Medicaid and Medicare, they need to. Right.
That's right.
Licensing, but they're.
But the wholesaler going directly to them doesn't care. Yes, absolutely. Yes, you should. Tina's a worldly team player. So let's talk about earnest money for a minute. If you are my wholesalers, do you plan on actually putting earnest money down with a purchase agreement that you intend to never close on? No. So can I ask you as realtors, what are you doing when the earnest money says there's $1,000 on there? Or there's $0 on that purchase agreement, and you know that it is a wholesaler buying it?
It's a discussion I'm gonna be having with my seller as to whether they want to move forward with it or not.
And as a seller, are you convinced that if your realtor would tell you, I have no earnest money, there is no collateral, this person never intends to close on the property, do you want to accept this offer? Probably not. Not saying that you couldn't. Go ahead, Tina.
Are there brokerages out there right now that their form, offer, says it's suitable?
No, in fact, in Columbus, I can just, and I don't know specifically, I can just tell you at the Columbus meetings for the state, I can tell you that most brokers there have put it in their independent contractor agreement that you are not allowed at their brokerage to even do wholesaling at all. I'm holding this class today to say, I'm trying to educate on what you can and can't do, because if wholesaling is done properly, you as an agent can represent that wholesaler and you will get it on the listing side. I would love to just say, don't do it, because I have a feeling there are going to be agents that don't know what they're doing that are going to do it anyway. And I have a feeling that there are agents that are doing it themselves. So I'm holding the class.
But say that again, you said we will end up how?
You will most likely, well, so if I'm a buyer and I come to you and I say, Lynette, I want to buy this, and I'll even sweeten the pot. Lynette, I want to buy this $500,000 house for $420,000. It's been on the market now for about 57 days. Would you represent me in that? Of course you are. Yes. And you know what? I don't really intend to close on the property, Lynette. I'm going to buy it and I'm going to resell it, and I want you to market that property for sale for me. Would you do that? Oh, I'm just going to find another realtor. Goodbye. That's what's going to happen. So, and as a seller, you're going to represent people that is your true seller, but a wholesaler is going to come to you and say, I want to buy this property, right? Or through another real estate agent.
Okay.
Good. Because you're in that lane.
Explain to me what the benefit is of being on the.
As a wholesaler, yep. I'm going to make you,
Usually it's reserved for very distressed property. Or people that really need to get out of the bind, but they're about to foreclose on.
Yep. Which we're going to that market. Like, you're going to start seeing these things popping up. Or I'm behind on my property taxes. Maybe I inherited a property. I've owned it for a couple of years. Now the auditor's after me for my tax bill and they want their money and I don't have it. So I'm going to sell my property. Right. So those would be reasons why, especially when there's no inspections, it's cash. You're giving me that cash in 30 days or less and I'm gone. Those would be the reasons.
Maybe think of the public saying, like, you need to ask this person who wants to buy your house if they're a wholesaler who's wanting to have a contract on your house, as opposed to, but I'm just thinking, like, as a realtor, like, it's your responsibility.
Yes, agreed. And you can definitely do that. Yep. Go ahead, Preston.
I came in a little late, you might have read, but I heard that Ohio was limiting or one to try to limit power that wholesalers have because they are not licensed to represent people's other, like their sale, their property.
So it was addressed in Columbus, and the short answer is we aren't doing anything, and it's not because we don't want to. It's simply because the legislators that are in power currently, they want less regulation and less licensing, not more. And so, unfortunately, unless we can find a legislator in Columbus that says, yes, I'm going to take this fight to the hill and I'm going to do this, we don't have any teeth whatsoever. And it's the division of licensing who actually has to do this. We can work with them to get it done, but we also have to find that human being in the state house that's willing to take this fight on. And right now, it would probably not benefit them at all, just because licensing, they want less of it. So they're not going to license a wholesaler, right? So I did share, though, that it may not fall under the real estate licensing, but it might fall under the securities licensing. So they are kind of looking into that. Not a clue.
This is a super regulated. I've lived in other states.
Yeah.
Or a highly regulated state. And it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily.
A lot of people don't want to move into the state because it's so heavily regulated. Businesses don't want to do business here because of the regulation. So they're trying to entice people, but that doesn't necessarily help some instances. So, okay. For the sake of time, let's move on because I don't want to keep you guys too long. We're going to be done in an hour. So, or an hour from now. An inspection period and repairs. So as a wholesaler, do you care about inspections or repairs? You don't care. You're not typically, right? Typically, you may or may not. But the thing is when you are representing a seller as the realtors here, and you are a seller and you have a contract that comes over to you that says no inspections, closing in 30 days, whatever. And now all of a sudden somebody wants to do an inspection on your property. If you don't have a strong realtor on your side, the inspection is probably going to take place. You're going to end up getting repairs or asked to be repairs and stuff. And you're actually having to do 2 different contracts now because you have a contract with the listing agent who has a contract now, or with another agent, doesn't matter, with the wholesaler. And now there's a contract out there between the wholesaler and another second buyer. So it can get convoluted and we'll go through some of this. All right, so realtors representing the wholesale buyer. All right, so now this row here in the middle, you guys are representing our wholesalers over here. So again, keeping on your fiduciary hats to the wholesaler, right? You have no fiduciary duty to the sellers anymore, right? Those are no longer your clients. Your clients are now my folks over here in this row.
But I didn't think it could represent that. Because we're not, it's not a property.
So you're not representing them as a listing. You are working on a purchase with them. I'm coming to you and saying, Lynette, I want you to, yep. So just the buyer. So does the wholesaler intend to close is the first question you need to ask them. Are you going to close on this property? The answer is going to be no. Do you, as the realtor, have a duty to the other agent to disclose that your buyer has no intentions of closing on the property?
Are they gonna say that they have no intention of closing?
All 3 of my guys over here, do you have, and I say guys, sorry, Tina, but all 3 of my people over here, would you, if you were a true person that said, I'm a wholesaler, are you going to close on a property unless you absolutely have to? Okay.
I think the people that I've come across, even explored deals with in the last couple of years, are people who, when they're looking at a property, they want to have options. Like, hey, I could wholesale it, I could take it out myself, or I could do something, or I could flip it and sell it. I was connected with a deal. I wasn't actually involved with it, but I looked at a property wholesale market that was giving the opportunity for people to walk through.
And how did you hear about that? Out of curiosity.
He posted on Facebook, hey, I've got a house in this area. Here's what I'm looking to sell it for. Who wants to schedule the walkthrough day? And he ended up taking it down, buying it, and has rented it out. So I would say sometimes, depending on their strategy.
And that's an
And he doesn't
instance.
identify as like, all I do is wholesale. No, I'm building wealth through real estate, and wholesaling is one of the things that I do. And I buy some of the ones that I'm just getting in front of deals. all the time.
Which is fine, but where he broke the licensing law, even though he's not licensed as a real estate agent, is he engaged in the practice of selling real estate by marketing the property for sale in a public forum, because I, as the general public, which is who the commissioner is trying to protect, I don't know that you're a wholesaler. I don't know that you don't own the property. I don't know that I'm doing a deal with you and not the owner of the, that's where he broke the law. And that's why we're saying wholesaling is a problem, because the consumer is the one that's not being protected. Yes, the wholesaler is building wealth, but that doesn't make it legal. It means that he posted a property in a public forum and I have no idea who I'm dealing with. I think I'm dealing with the owner of the property, and I'm not. As a real estate agent.
It's not actually.
Right.
That they're not
Right. And that's where the problem comes in. So Mark, your point is well taken, that that individual may or may not have decided to wholesale the property or keep it at the time they put it for sale. The problem is they broke the law when they put it up for sale and marketed the property as if it were their own.
Well, I'm going to see that I think this guy says, I have here in front that like I
And perhaps he could. Yeah, so that'd be interesting. Go ahead, Tina. You seem to be over there a lot.
So as, and we're talking to wholesalers, are we not doing all that proof of funds? Or we even present that offer to the seller?
Well, and that's the thing, you'll see on here, we have proof of funds. Are you getting proof of funds? Does that matter? And I guess that's the question is how many offers? Are you asking the wholesaler how many offers they have out there? Could they close on them all? So, I mean, that's the thing as working with an agent. So again, if I'm the buyer's agent here and I'm working with you as a wholesaler and I say to you, Tina, that's great. You want to make an offer on this $200,000 property that is really worth $250,000. I love that. And I want to work with you. And I know you're not asking me to represent you on the sale of the house, except for, I'm sorry, just the sale of the house. You don't want me to relist it or do anything. But I have to ask you, do you have proof of funds? And if you give me the answer, even if you say yes, great. And I see that you have $280,000 in your checking account. Wonderful. How many other offers do you have out as a wholesaler? Are you going to answer me truthfully? And if you do, say, I actually have 8 offers out right now because I'm just waiting. Whichever one jumps on it first, that's the one I'm taking. Great. Can you close on them all if they all sign those 8 offers? Well, no, I don't have $1 million. Okay, well, don't you think as the agent representing that buyer, you still have a fiduciary? And the question is, who's the fiduciary to? It's to the buyer. But also, don't you have an ethical obligation as a professional to tell that listing realtor that this may or may not close because if my buyer closes on 3 other properties, he doesn't have any money left to close on yours?
Like that, I'm writing a contract, right? Because I gotta put in the closing date, I gotta show proof of funds, and then I gotta have my buyer sign it, and like, so there's like very final and concrete things in place in the contract that I'm used to filling out for our brokerage. So I feel like I would just be conflicted the whole way through, that I don't feel like I could actually write this contract to represent a true wholesaler. Now, if it's somebody who said, yes, I'm going to actually buy it,
Yeah.
if I don't find somebody else, then that might be different. Like, if
Absolutely.
everything falls apart, for me, then okay. But if you're truly just wanting to have a contract to sell to somebody else, I don't feel like I can represent that.
And that's an excellent point. And that's why I say to you, it depends. You can represent a wholesaler competently and legally if that wholesaler has good intentions of saying, I'm as true as my word and I'm going to close on this property. If I can't sell my interest in it, I am going to close on this property. We don't typically see that. So like this is an anomaly that you actually have a human being that's acting professionally.
3 deals for us. And kind of gave vague information. Here's what's going on.
Yep.
And then.
And that, go ahead. No, I'll say that, and that's the question though, like too, we aren't involved with that particular instance or hopefully that person, but he has 3. That goes back to my same question. You have those 3 out there, but if push came to shove, could you close on all 3 of those offers that he had? We don't know the answer. Probably not. So it's a gamble. And then you're saying, okay, well, am I opening somebody up to a lawsuit considering the fact that there is, if I wanted to, I could take a cash buyer to court and say, I'm going to sue you for specific performance. You didn't close on the property. You offered me this and I'll wait 3 years to get my money. You're buying this house. That would put a couple wholesalers out of business, I'm sure, you know, so it's a gamble.
If they sold that contract, how is that gonna come into play then? Because they're not actually gonna close on this contract, on this offer that I wrote to the seller. Like I just.
They're not. That's right. They're not going to close, but the seller will see the assignment fee. And so then that's another question too, is who's getting paid? What realtor is getting paid and what commission are you getting paid? Because the MLS is the contract that you have with the listing person, but now you have a third party in here buying that property for more. So if I came, my seller's over here and I said to you, I'm gonna do a net sheet. You owe $5,000 in commission, right? You take this offer from the wholesaler, it's $5,000. Now all of a sudden, Mark comes in and says, and we're gonna put Mark as an agent now. Mark comes in and he's an agent, he's representing Lynette in this particular instance and says, I'm gonna buy the house for $250,000 now.
Well, don't you think Mark wants paid off the $250,000 sale price that the seller offered in the MLS or the listing broker's? Yes, think about it.
Yeah, but it's only assuming the contract that's already in place. They're assuming that, and then they add on that, we're only gonna get.
But how does that affect the real estate agent?
They're only assuming the contract in place, right? So they're only getting, they're gonna.
But how would I know that? I don't, how would I know that? If I'm the buyer's agent, the second buyer, and I'm coming in to buy it. all I see is And it's, how would I know that? And it's not in a contract that you put commission in there because the commission is paid within the broker, it doesn't belong on the contract because it's not paid by a buyer or seller.
So they're seeing that other contracts, they're only.
We'll get onto that, so we'll get onto that in the next slide, but that's the question is, are you asking for that actual contract between the wholesaler and the seller?
But I have more contracts that actually have the commission noted on it.
Howard Hanna's is the only one that I'm aware of, but there could be more. And I will just tell you,
Noted on what they agree with.
and it probably happens more so in Mansfield, Ashland area. And that's because they have special deals where if they like you, they give you more commission. So. Go ahead.
As an agent, and I'm representing a wholesaler, a buyer, you said you can do that. So now if they assign the contract to another buyer, who are you representing?
You still only represent the wholesaler. You have no representation for that second buyer.
So how
But there
would
could be
you-
another realtor.
Like, you never close on a deal, even if you're. I don't understand.
Right. So how are you getting paid?
How would you ever represent them? Like, there's no.
If you represented a wholesaler, so if Mark comes to Lynette and says, Lynette, I want you to represent me to buy a property, I'm going to try and sell this interest. But if I can't, I intend to close on the property. Mark closes on the property, Lynette gets paid, you're the listing agent, you get paid, done. You can competently and legally represent a wholesaler if they are as true as the contract that is written. That's right.
You just have to be discerning and know if this person's actually legitimate to perform, and that you run the risk, if they assign it to somebody else, there could be a problem there.
Or that buyer perhaps doesn't have anybody representing them because the wholesaler wrote the contract up with the buyer. And the buyer has no idea that there's a realtor involved.
If they put- they're gonna Essentially, if they're not gonna perform on this contract and actually put it in their name.
But I would have to tell you that most wholesalers are not going to put earnest money down. If they don't intend to close on the house, and that might be the distinguishing difference between somebody that's as good as their word and contract and a wholesaler that's not. If I put earnest money down, perhaps I'm probably going to have more skin in the game. I'm going to close, right? But if I'm not, why would I put earnest money down? So I can have somebody hold it for 2 years?
All along, I mean, yeah, misrepresented something. Never really. I'm just like, all about it, I'm like, no.
Great.
Distinguish that, okay, like auctioneers, they get paid from the buyer, correct?
They charge a 10% typically fee.
That's
Mhm.
what. Because they're charging, right? A person who is,
But we as real estate agents can charge our clients commission too.
right?
You as a buyer's agent, you can say, I only work for a 3% commission. And if I walk into a house that's only 2.5, you, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, on the hook for the other half of that commission, the other 0.5% of that commission. And as long as I have it in a written agreement between me and my buyer, and they're going to pay it at the closing table, there's nothing wrong with that.
I have a question about these contracts. So what makes their contract legal? Like, is it just the fact that-
Well, a signature. I mean, if you have a seller and a buyer signature, that would make it legal.
I guess it's like, because I know a lot of them, they just go type in wholesaler. So just because they can download that, they get someone's signature on it, that makes it legal binding.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a purchase agreement on a cocktail napkin. Wouldn't matter. Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about realtors representing the second buyer. right? So now no longer don't worry about being a seller at this point. Don't worry about being a realtor that is representing the seller or representing the buyer. Let's all be together and say that we are representing the second buyer. So I walk into your establishment and I say, I want to go purchase 1234 Main Street. And you say, okay, great, let's go take a look at it, right? It might be under contract, allow showing. So let's go see what we can find. So again, the division is saying have an attorney review the contract and request a copy of the assignment contract. So you're going to know that's an assignment contract when you start getting things that are signed by somebody other than the seller, right? So the seller has to review or have the property disclosure and lead-based paint disclosure if applicable. That's who's supposed to be filling it out. The wholesaler should never be filling out a residential property disclosure form or a lead-based paint. Only the owner of the property. So you as the second buyer's agent or second buyer for that agent, you're going to understand that the person that is signing the purchase agreement, their signature or their initials are different than the seller that originally signed the lead-based paint disclosure and the RPD. So the transparency then is you as the agent representing that second buyer, you're going to need to let them know, hey, you're actually not working with the seller or owner of this property. Yes, they filled out the property disclosure form, but that's not who's signing the purchase agreement. They have a separate agreement with the seller, the person that you're working with, right? So now I'm going to say to you, I'm going to throw something else in there and say, well, do you legally have a purchase agreement in place if it's the wholesaler that actually signed the purchase agreement, even though they don't own the property? And you don't. So you're going to give earnest money. You're going to pay for an appraisal. You're going to do all these things on the good faith of hoping the wholesaler doesn't screw you out of your money. So that's a problem. The other thing I would say is, has a title search been completed by the first buyer or the first contract? Because what happens if there are a bunch of liens or something against the property that the wholesaler giving that X amount of money to the seller, maybe it doesn't clear the title. Maybe there's liens or tax liens or, back taxes or whatever that, mechanics liens or something like that. You're buying the property for 200,000, but really the seller is only getting 150. And by the time they pay the commission and their closing costs, they need to bring $10,000 to the closing table. Go ahead.
For new agents, they should know that the tax and legal fees are. They do
Yeah.
that before.
Yes. And that's a good point.
Because a lot of people do not do that. Seasoned agents
Mhm.
have been caught not doing tax and legal and having
Yep.
that information.
Absolutely. No, that's an excellent point.
First step.
Yep.
is for that.
Yeah. As soon as you know you're going on a listing appointment, and it's free. Yep. So that's the other question you're going to ask though is is there a title search that's been completed? Do I know that I'm actually entering into a property I can close on? Again, we go back to the commission for the realtor, how much commission is getting paid and who's it getting paid to? Because now you might have 2 or 3 realtors involved in one transaction, right? And then who is actually paying that commission? Because again, it goes back to Mark thinks he's getting $250,000 at 3%. You in the middle think that you're getting 200,000 at 3%, and you as the seller think you're only paying 200,000 at 3%. Where's that other $50,000 at 3% coming from? I can honestly say I will knock on wood and hope I never find out as a broker. I don't know, because we haven't had to deal with it. And I honestly, there's not enough case law either, unfortunately, to find out what's really happening, because these wholesalers have been so successful in private chats and communities at buying a property and successfully circumventing real estate agents and lawsuits. So, but again, we're going to see more of that coming just simply because of the way that the market's going. So, all right, so let's just talk about realtors representing themselves as the wholesaler. So we're all realtors now in this room. We're not segregated by buyers, sellers. We're all realtors. And I can guarantee you there are realtors out there doing this. I hope they're not from our brokerage, but they perhaps could be. So when you contact an owner of a property, are you identifying yourself as a licensee in the state of Ohio? If you're not, that's a problem. You should be identifying your name and the company, the brokerage that you're working with, because if you're not, you are unfortunately breaking licensing law, which can land you to lose your license altogether. So reselling the property, an agent is always supposed to disclose that they own the property. But if we go back even to the beginning of this, the wholesaler doesn't own the property. You as an agent can't say agent owned because you don't actually own the property. You may have negotiated a sale price and you own a contract on a property that you are trying to then sell. However, you're going to muddy the waters if you put agent owned on there because you're lying. You're not, you do not own the property, right? So then the next question is the fiduciary duty. Do you have the listing? If you have the listing and you're also acting as a wholesale buyer on the property, now you've really muddied the waters because unfortunately you have a fiduciary to that seller to explain to the seller that they can get more money. And you have to disclose what you're doing with the property as the licensee. I'm wholesaling your property so that when I get a call from somebody as the listing agent, and now I'm marketing the property for sale, I've left it in the MLS as active because I want to sell it. And the seller calls and says, wait a minute, you're buying my property, or an LLC. Maybe you're not disclosing that you're an owner in the LLC, which you should be, is buying my property. Why is it still for sale? Why are you marketing my property for sale? So there's going to be a lot of questions that they could have, so you can really get yourself into hot water with that. Also, disclosure to the seller that you're licensed. Again, no matter if you're representing the seller or if you aren't representing a seller and you're just soliciting. So this goes back to your question. You've got agents that will call and solicit your father to maybe purchase his home, perhaps. If they're not identifying themselves as a licensee right away up front, that's a problem. That's a license law violation. So the next question is, do you intend to close? As a licensed professional, you are different than the general public. So when you go into a property, whether you represent the seller or not, if you have no intentions of closing on that property, you are lying to a customer. Maybe not be a client, but they are a customer. And even though you may not owe them confidentiality, you do owe them honesty, right? So you may not have all of those other things, but you definitely owe honesty and ethics to a customer. So if you don't intend to close, that you need to disclose to the seller. I don't intend to close on your property. I'm going to resell it, right? And then if you're the listing agent, I would just tell you right now, if you're the listing agent, you shouldn't be doing anything with wholesaling as a buyer, as an agent with that consumer. Because first and foremost, you cannot represent yourself and another party in any real estate transaction. And I'll say, so if you are the listing agent of your own property that you own, you cannot represent a buyer. It's illegal. You cannot be a dual agent. I understand that a loophole could be looked at as an LLC, if you will, right? I'm a buyer, but I own an LLC. It's my LLC that's buying the property. So I'm not really a dual agent because my LLC is not a licensed entity with the state as far as a real estate license. I would tell you that's a pretty fine line, and I would not want to be in front of the division, and I wouldn't want to be in front of my seller asking that, why they're asking me the question, why weren't you honest with me, right? Because it's not worth losing your real estate license to try and build this wealth. You can build wealth without being a liar, right? So, right, yeah. Building wealth without lying. And then I had an interesting one, I will tell you, a few months back. We actually had an agent that called and asked, she and her partner were going to be a power of attorney for a seller. You should never, as a licensee, ever become a power of attorney for any of your clients. There will be no legal reason why you would ever need to be that power of attorney. Red flag, right? I will also say, if you have a power of attorney that is signing listing documents and you don't know who the real owner is, that's a problem, right? So I bring this up simply because we actually had a wholesaler circumvent the process by becoming a power of attorney for the seller. The seller was stupid enough to give them the right to sell their home and become power of attorney. Well, this went in front of the division. It did actually go in front of the division, thankfully. So we have some, not case law, but we have some precedents around this. But basically, the wholesaler was not providing the true story to the seller, right? They were lying to the seller. They were saying, I'm going to pay you X amount of money. Let me be your POA. I can now list the property for sale on your behalf, even though you're signing all the documents as a seller. The wholesaler is the one signing all of them because you gave them POA. And now the realtor comes out and says, yep, this is a legitimate power of attorney. You gave it to them. You're the owner of the property. I absolutely can list this home for sale. So I do. And I list it for $200,000 and you're only getting $100,000 as a seller. Guess who's going to be real mad when you find that out? The seller. And so unfortunately that did go in front of the division and a broker actually lost their real estate license altogether.
How old was the person who signed that POA?
I don't know. I don't have that. Oh, I'm sure you could.
That could have gotten
Well, the wholesaler definitely got in trouble, but the licensee did as well.
lost your license. No, they would have.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to them. Yeah. Agreed. No, it's predatory. So go ahead, Linda.
Just quick sidebar, and I know we're having a class on it next month. New state contract, does it talk about this at all?
The wholesaling? No, it doesn't talk about wholesaling at all, unfortunately, because again, the division is saying we can't, there's no law that says you can or can't do it. There's no licensing that you have to have in order to do it. What they can control is what real estate professionals do. That they can control. Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit about advertising, right? So advertising, we've talked a little bit about it, but realtors nor wholesalers are legally allowed to market a property for sale using photos or the MLS. You cannot represent a wholesaler. Go ahead. My misspelling is allowed. Yeah, I know. I see it.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You know me.
I saw that. I put this PowerPoint together last night late. Leave me alone. Yeah.
Oh, it's good.
Yes, thank you.
I'll pick up the other.
This is why we don't let her sit in the front. Her eyes aren't good enough. We put her in the back. She would never seen it. So,
True story.
anyway, the point of the first statement, don't be sorry, is I would have picked it up too because I'm a terrible speller, but I somehow notice spelling errors, right? I don't know. So realtors, you can't do that. So we talked about that a little bit ago. You can't market the property for sale if you don't actually own the property or have the owner's permission. Why is it a problem? Because the division and the Consumer Protection Bureau, everybody, they're there to protect the consumer. They're not there to protect you, right? The Department of Commerce is there to protect the consumer. So if I am advertising a property for sale, or if I see a property advertised for sale, I'm going to assume one of two things. The owner is selling it or a licensed realtor has it for sale. That's my assumption, right? So when a property is marketed for sale, the public assumes that the property, so we covered that, all right. So, and then are licensees in private Facebook groups? I guess I would ask that question because the answer is probably yes. I don't know if any of you are in a private Facebook group for wholesaling. If you are, it's probably not something you should be engaging in, or I wouldn't be commenting if you're looking for it to buy properties or something like that, or looking for your clients, right? We want the in for our clients. And so therefore I can understand why an agent would be in there. Again, it goes back to all the things that we've already talked about, which is, are you truly representing your buyer or your seller competently and legally if you are soliciting a wholesaler for a purchase agreement and it's being assigned? And are you going to get paid for it? So ask yourself those questions.
So could you, as an agent, buy a property that's for sale? Like, could you buy a property from a wholesaler? Does that make sense?
You could buy a property from a wholesaler if you really wanted to. But again, you're going to represent yourself in the transaction. So I hope that you're competent enough to understand what's going on. Is there another agent involved? That's the next question is, what agent are you dealing with? Are you allowed to do inspections? Are you not allowed to do inspections? I mean, there's a lot of questions that you would want to ask.
contract. The weird gray stuff in the middle.
Right, you're dealing with,
And you're not. Something that you. If you
Right.
or something like that.
No, it's just one thing you're getting taken advantage of. 'Cause you won't
Right.
be able to do any yes or no proposition. Here it is. I'm selling you interest in the
Well, not
contract.
necessarily. You
Yeah,
can
it is. They aren't gonna let me go look. Are they every time? Oh, yeah.
you can go look at the property. Yeah, you can go look. Well, they perhaps will be, but I would, yeah, I would encourage you to keep turning them in. There were plenty of people in Columbus, a room full of like,
Facebook groups, because I was gonna turn everybody in.
Right.
I'm too busy.
yeah, yeah.
It's amazing.
But if you're in those groups and you're finding that your buyers, your wholesale buyers contracts, again, you can legally represent them competently. You have the in on the Facebook page that says, hey, I can get my buyer, or the way the market's been lately, a property's not being marketed on the MLS because it's under contract perhaps, or it's off market altogether, and you're in a Facebook group where you've now found your buyer a house by being in that group. You still just need to represent them competently by disclosing to them that they're paying more for it than whatever. And you hope that there's probably not another agent involved, or you're not getting paid perhaps, or you got to find out how you're getting paid. But there are agents. I mean, look, we're entrepreneurs, right? I mean, that's what we do. So there's nothing wrong with you being in a Facebook group that is looking for homes for your buyers that are not on the market or that you can't find in the MLS. You're being an entrepreneur for one. It's not looking out for your best interest, but you are looking out for your client's best interest. I'm trying to find them a home. At all costs, I'm trying to find them a home. And then they have to make the decision, am I going to pay $245,000 for a house that's really selling for $200,000? That's why the attorneys at Ohio Realtors are saying, ask for the assignment contract, ask for the original contract that is between the two parties. So that way, if there are any special circumstances involved in that, you can represent your client competently to say, oh, they have whatever the price is, you're paying more than that. Well, let's talk about appraisals. Let's talk about all kinds of things. But there's nothing wrong with you finding a property for your buyer.
The other day. This is contradicting a lot of what was being said at that.
Who was at that meeting and what was it?
Because that person was not going to put that above, but that person was saying that he was buying and then he was wholesaling.
No. He was simply saying, hey, there's a quad in this area, here's the numbers, who's interested?
Right, but he was also saying that that's how he was doing it, he was buying them, and then he was wholesaling them. Also, then he was dual them, because he is now, he's licensed.
And off camera, we need to know who that person is, if that's the case, because I will tell you, that's exactly why I'm having this class. You can't do that. It's illegal.
That's why I'm fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was busy to say that. Doing that. And now because I was all down here, so I'm trying to figure it out. Something that I want to do. Not.
Let's just hypothetically say, are you saying that this particular an agent is representing a seller and then wholesaling the property?
I mean.
If
The buyer and then wholesaling.
okay, so let's just use an example instead of he, she, they. So we'll just say they are, or just say I'm walking in and I am going to Linda. Let's say Linda's the listing agent, right? I'm going to go to Linda and I'm a licensed agent. Linda, I'd like to buy your listing. I would like to buy it for $20,000, and I am not going to tell you whether I'm going to close on the property or not, but I'm going to put in my purchase agreement that it's assignable. And then your seller says, hey, I don't care what you do with the property. I just want to get rid of it. Linda says, great, fine. We don't care what you do with it. Assign it, whatever. So I go out and now I am, as a licensee, putting on Facebook or marketing a property or advertising in any way, shape, or form that is illegal. I do not own the property. I am not the listing agent of the property, and I have no interest in the property. I have an interest in the contract. That's all I have. That would be illegal.
I can get the impression, just
subject.
Yep.
So it may be like a really good conversation.
Yep.
being had to make sure that it's not.
Yeah. And that's good.
Because Good, but what I'm hearing is. Last week.
So with the, like, I'm just picturing if you're doing this legally, your Facebook page, if you're a wholesaler, just a bunch of pictures of contracts.
Essentially,
For property, so
well, go ahead.
People are.
It's typically
They
not
do.
marketing like we are.
Right.
You know, it's who I know that's interested in this vague description. And
Right.
it's more of an in-house, it's putting out a description and having a list of people or enough people that are saying, well, this person's getting in front of deals. And they raise their hand and they direct message them. There's a major one who plays up in kind of this Toledo area who just does Google Drive. Okay, who's interested in information office? And she just closes, like, they've asked her, this is the sign contract, and she's very upfront on this.
Because I'm going to a Columbus meeting about this subject as well, who's been introduced back in our. So I want to make sure I ask the questions here, the info.
Yep.
And I get my bearings straight before I go into a larger group and get myself in trouble.
Yep.
So, I mean, I want to make sure that I'm understanding.
Yeah, and I would encourage any of you, I mean, you can go back, I mean, I was present in the meeting, but I can also, you can go back and watch the video from Columbus where it's OhioRealtors.com. If you just go to the Ohio Realtors website and type in the search bar wholesaling, the video will pop up. It was just in February. And again, you have the Ohio State attorney that represents all of us in this room and all realtors in Ohio. You have the division who is Kim Wells. You don't want to mess with her and you don't want your name on her desk. She will not play games. She will come after your throat. And Daphne Hawk, who is the division, she's the superintendent. She's a newer superintendent, but she's been in real estate for a very long time. They are there to protect the consumer, and they're not playing games. And then you also had somebody from YPN that was up there as well, and one of our people from Ohio Realtors, our government affairs director. So you had some pretty people that were very knowledgeable of what's going on at the State House with this, what's going on at the division with this, what's going on with Ohio Realtors and the hotline with this. It's about an hour long, but it's worth a watch. But that's where a lot of the content came from.
I was invited to 2 different like investor meetings, like in person, once a month. And I get the feeling that's where a lot of these people go on. And I,
Yep.
like I said, a friend of mine who's an architect, she should be doing this. It's just like here. And she got me into these and I was like, oh, I've already talked to a couple people about it because I was telling you about it before. But I don't know. I don't feel like I can know now. Part of me was like, oh, I'll just get some investor clients, but I get the feeling that they're all working with these kind of people, like with the wholesalers.
Well, again, I don't want wholesaling. I don't want you to leave the room thinking that wholesaling is illegal or that it's a bad thing or the people engaged in it are bad human beings, because that's not the case. It can be done legally. This class is only to tell you as a licensee, you have a fiduciary duty to a buyer or a seller, right? You also have ethics that you have to uphold. The wholesaler does not, right? There's nothing that regulates them. You are regulated. That's why this is so important for you as real estate professionals to understand what you can and can't do. It's your choice of whether you're going to engage in the activity or not engage in the activity. I will say that if you are competent and you follow kind of what we've gone through today, get business, right? Make some money, like that's fine, build wealth. But if you are seeing something that's not right, get out of it, because I know I don't want to be the broker that's on the front page of something making precedent because we just didn't care, or we have an agent that's engaging in the practice and just going, hey, I'm going to buy this property, but I'm never going to close on it. I'm just doing this. Like, you don't have to have a real estate license for that, right? And I would say, you know, if you guys see something, it's kind of like that, see something, say something. Let me know in confidence. We don't need to call out anybody that's doing it, but certainly let leadership, somebody know what's going on, because it affects the entire brokerage, right? Our E&O insurance, just our livelihood at altogether, we're one big family here. So, just because an agent's engaging in something, maybe they don't know that they're engaging in something they shouldn't be, right? I mean, that's the whole point of having the class, is what you didn't know. So again, don't think of it as an ugly or bad word. Just be competent in the fact that if you're going to do it, there's risks. That's all. Yeah. So, and then lastly, we'll just kind of go over a summary here. It is recommended, from brokers, don't work with wholesalers. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. They can get you in trouble, or you can get yourself in trouble. You want to always have legal counsel review the purchase agreements, whether you're on the listing side, the buyer side, if you're the second buyer, no matter what. Disclosure. The PowerPoint didn't like that I put disclosure, so it deleted it. But I'm going to say to you, like, disclosure is what you're supposed to do. Make sure that you're disclosing as much as you possibly can, and be careful of that, because again, if you are representing that wholesaler, you have a fiduciary duty to them, not to the other agent or the seller, but you also have the ethics because of your license. You do have a duty to disclose. And if you know that somebody's not going to close on something, you really should be disclosing that to that other realtor. However, you are also somewhat breaking the trust of your wholesaler if they say, I don't want you to disclose anything. So now you have to decide, do I want to be breaking ethics and violating my license and possibly getting fined or whatever over working with a wholesaler? Perhaps not. Good.
I think we already addressed this earlier. Wholesaling.
It's not.
There's nothing that, I don't know they signed with a wholesaler for this interest in the contract.
Mhm.
There's nothing to protect us from being wrapped up in that.
Even if there was something in the listing agreement that said, have you signed with a wholesaler? They can answer the question, but I think as a listing agent, that could be just part of your conversation with the seller is, if they've signed with a wholesaler, then you shouldn't be getting a listing agreement. I mean, ultimately, but going over the exclusive right to sell, again, if you understand the differences in the rights to sell, exclusive means we are the only brokerage. You can't sell the property on your own. Another brokerage can't come in and sell. We have the exclusive right. So those are in the words, and that is your job as the agent to explain. The listing agreement is an exclusive right to sell agreement. These are the terms from the start date to the end date. You're giving us permission to photograph your house. You're going through all of those things. Are you married? Do I need your spouse's signature? That's all in the contract, and that's just the listing agent's responsibility to be explained that. So, I mean, could we put a questionnaire in there? Like, have you signed anything with somebody else? But
Well, I think it comes back to that. License to sell contract, two things, right? I'm trying to sell a home versus the separate kind of interest in contract.
yeah, but the homeowner has entered into an agreement, even though the wholesaler is trying to sell a piece of paper, an interest, they have a legally binding contract to purchase the real estate, right? So they still have to purchase the real estate legally if that were enforced by a court. And that's why I say they could be sued for specific performance, because they entered into a purchase agreement. Even though the wholesaler is not really trying to sell that or not legally allowed to sell that property, they are selling their interest. So it is the same thing when it comes down to if a seller has signed any agreement, any purchase agreement whatsoever with another party, we have a problem. We can't list the property because there could be a cloud on the title. Yep. Go ahead.
That's something that I bring into, I work with a lot of investors. And like, like San Diego, triplex. She's part of like the cash buyers list for wholesalers. I give her some information, the owner's name, and all that kind of stuff. The triplex is a horrible condition, which most wholesalers
Sure.
are. How can you reach out to the, if they don't have a listing agreement with another brokerage, so can we solicit them for sale? Because that wholesaler was selling for like $65,000, but his assignment fee was $15,000, which is insane for a property like that. Where I could say, hey, this wholesaler is stealing their equity. Where if you would list with us, it's like maybe $3,000 to $4,000.
But the problem is the seller has already signed a purchase agreement with the wholesaler.
But is that still soliciting?
No, you as the agent could, but where you're gonna run into a problem is you can have them sign an exclusive right to sell. You can put the property up for sale and say these people are stealing your equity. The problem is they still have a legally binding contract, which the wholesaler could enforce. And what wholesaler is gonna do that? If I've got $16,000 on the line, why would I sign a mutual release? No way. I'm gonna say you entered into an agreement with me to sell the property for this price. If you don't like it, hire an attorney, but I'm not letting you out of this. And you as the realtor don't want to get involved in that situation because you're going to put a property up for sale that you know you legally can't sell. And if you do, you could be sued because you've now sold a property that already had a contract on it. So
Now, sure, what the legal like proceedings were.
There's no problem soliciting a seller that's not listed with another brokerage. That's absolutely okay. But the other thing I would ask you too is this an investor that you have worked with before? So would you not agree that she thinks that you represent her and you owe her a fiduciary? Then you're breaking that by going to the seller and trying to solicit the listing. No, for you to list it for sale, saying that this person's stealing her equity.
No, that was.
Okay.
She wasn't- Like this area of home, like how would you say, I have a rental, it's like a couple blocks, and I was just telling her how the property was, then me personally digging into it, when I was like, why would he sell it for 16, or like, give this guy $16 to sell it instead of just go to a realtor, throw it up on the MLS.
But the seller's not the one paying the 16,000.
No.
It's the next buyer that's paying. And the next buyer may or may not know that they're paying that assignment fee. And they probably don't care. I mean, if I'm buying a property
Oh, yeah.
that much below market value, I don't care that you're making $16,000 on the property. I could care less.
That's the value wholesaler.
Right, that's right. Right. That's how I'm getting my money is the wholesaler is and the buyer doesn't care because you still got a good deal. So but I would say again, just be careful because if it is an investor that you have worked with in the past and they are your client, you have a duty to them, not to anybody else. And but I love the passion. I love that you're asking the question, looking out for the seller, because that's the right thing to do as a human being too, if you're not a predatory person. But you also don't predatory, we throw around like, again, that's a bad word too. But if I have disclosed everything to the seller, if I'm the wholesaler and I've disclosed that I am giving you this and you're happy with it, I've done nothing wrong, right?
Everyone knows what's going on, then.
Yeah.
And as long as everybody knows what's going on, there's nothing wrong with it. So, yeah. So again, please don't leave this room thinking that wholesaling is bad, illegal, or anything, or that the people that do it are bad, because they're not. It's just how it's done. Yeah. And then again, I would just say realtors, you should never be wholesalers yourself, ever. You have a license. You're going to owe somebody a fiduciary duty. And when they find out that you're a licensed agent and you've done them wrong, I don't want to be on that side of the division. Yeah. So as a licensee, you should not be entering into wholesaling purchase agreements with sellers. And if you are, I need to talk to you because I'd love to understand how you're doing it and feel like you're doing it legally. And if there's a way, educate me. So any other questions? Okay. Well, everybody's head spinning. We got out 10 minutes early. Thanks for attending. Thanks.